At 9:17 on Thursday morning, the florist called to ask why my mother-in-law had canceled the baby shower. I was standing barefoot in our kitchen, with one hand pressed against the curve of my stomach and the other holding a butter knife. A slice of toast had gone cold on the counter. The refrigerator motor hummed behind me. Rain tapped against the narrow window over the sink. The florist introduced herself as Lena from White Fern Floral Studio. She said she had received a cancellation request for the order scheduled for Saturday at Bellwether House. I looked at the calendar pinned beside the pantry. Saturday, May 18th. Baby shower. 37 guests. 11 days before my scheduled induction. I asked Lena who had canceled it. She hesitated. Then she said, the woman listed as the event coordinator. Marjorie Vale, my mother-in-law. I put the butter knife down. The blade left a streak of raspberry jam on the white counter. I asked when the cancellation had been made. Wednesday at 4:42 in the afternoon. I had been asleep then. Pregnancy had turned 4 in the afternoon into a wall I could not climb. I had spent most of Wednesday lying on the couch with a pillow between my knees, while my husband Elliot worked upstairs. I asked whether the floral order had been refunded. Lena said the deposit was non-refundable, but Marjorie had asked for the remaining balance to be removed, and the flowers released for another event. I looked at the stack of pale green invitations beside the fruit bowl. My name was printed across the top in small gold letters. A shower for Clara and Baby Vale. I had addressed every envelope myself. I said, "Do not release the flowers." Lena went quiet. I told her I was the mother being celebrated. I had not canceled anything. She asked if I could verify the order number. I could. I kept records. That was what I did for a living. Before the pregnancy, I had managed production schedules for a small furniture company called Renford Workshop. I tracked timber shipments, vendor invoices, installation dates, staff hours, and client revisions. I had learned that most disasters did not arrive without warning. They left a trail first. A changed number, a missing confirmation, a name copied onto an email where it did not belong. I opened the event folder on my laptop. There were 43 emails, 5 contracts, 3 payment receipts, and 1 spreadsheet titled Baby Shower Final. The floral order number was WF 18427. I read it aloud. Lena confirmed it. Then she said something that made the room feel smaller. She said, "Marjorie told us the family had decided the shower was no longer appropriate." I asked what that meant. Lena said she did not know. I thanked her and told her I would call back within the hour. When the call ended, I stood still. The rain strengthened against the window. Upstairs, Elliot's office chair rolled across the floor. I did not call for him. I opened my email instead. There was no message from Bellwether House, no message from the caterer, no message from the baker. That did not reassure me. It meant Marjorie had not finished. Or it meant she had been careful. I clicked into the shared event account she had insisted we create 3 months earlier. She had said it would make planning easier. 1 inbox, 1 calendar, no confusion. At the time, it had sounded practical. Now I checked the sent folder, empty, then the trash folder, also empty. I opened the account settings. The recovery email had been changed. It was no longer mine. It belonged to Marjorie. I felt the baby shift low beneath my ribs. Not a kick, more like a slow turn. I rested both hands on my stomach and counted to 5. I had known Marjorie for 7 years. She was not loud. She did not slam doors or raise her voice. She arranged things. She corrected small details before anyone else noticed them. She brought linen napkins to restaurants she considered careless. She carried aspirin, mints, safety pins, and stain remover in separate labeled pouches. When Elliot and I became engaged, she gave me a leather planner. On the first page, she had written that good families were built through preparation. I had believed she meant it kindly. For most of our relationship, Marjorie treated me with a form of polished acceptance. She remembered my birthday. She ordered tea instead of coffee when I visited. She included me in family photographs, though she always placed me near the edge. The problems began after I became pregnant, not when we announced it, before that. They began when Elliot told her we had been trying. She called me the next morning and asked whether I had considered waiting another year. She said Elliot was carrying too much responsibility at work. She said our townhouse had steep stairs. She said I had always seemed devoted to my career. I told her we were ready. She replied that people often mistook wanting something for being prepared for it. I let the comment pass. There were many comments I let pass. At 9 weeks, she sent me a list of obstetricians without asking who I had chosen. At 12 weeks, she booked a private room at a restaurant for a gender announcement we had never planned to have. At 16 weeks, she bought a crib. It was walnut, carved, and enormous. It arrived at our house on a Tuesday with 2 delivery men and no warning. It did not fit through the nursery door. When I told her we had already ordered a smaller crib, she said Elliot had slept in walnut and survived. At 20 weeks, we learned we were having a girl. Marjorie cried. For a moment, I thought she was happy. Then she said she had always wanted a daughter. Elliot had been standing beside me in the ultrasound room. His hand was around mine. He did not respond. Neither did I. Later, in the parking garage, I asked him if the comment bothered him. He said his mother became emotional around milestones. He said she had lost 2 pregnancies before he was born. He said I should not assume the worst meaning. I did not assume it. I remembered it. There was a difference. The baby shower had been her idea. I had not wanted one at first. My pregnancy had been more difficult than expected. I had severe nausea until week 22. At week 28, my blood pressure began to rise. My doctor reduced my hours and told me to avoid unnecessary stress. A large party felt like unnecessary stress. Marjorie disagreed. She said a first grandchild deserved to be welcomed properly. She found Bellwether House, a restored brick estate outside the fictional town of Cedar Hollow. It had tall windows, pale oak floors, and a garden room with glass doors overlooking a pond. The rental fee was more than I would have chosen, but Marjorie said she wanted to pay for the venue as her gift. I accepted. That was my first mistake. The contract listed both our names. That was my second. The guest list became a negotiation. I invited my mother, my sister, 6 friends, 3 coworkers, and several women from Elliot's family whom I genuinely liked. Marjorie added 22 names. Some were women I had met once. 2 were her former coworkers. 1 was the wife of Elliot's childhood orthodontist. I removed 7. She added 5 back. I chose sage green and cream. She ordered blue ribbons because she said green photographed poorly. I chose a simple lemon cake. She sent the baker a photograph of a 4-tier cake covered in sugar flowers. I asked the baker to return to the original design. The next day, Marjorie called Elliot and said I was excluding her. He came into the bedroom while I was folding infant clothes. He sat on the edge of the mattress and said his mother felt as though I wanted her money, but not her involvement. I placed a yellow sleeper into the drawer. Then I told him I had not asked for her money. He said he knew. I asked whether he had told her that. He looked at the carpet. That answer mattered more than anything he could have said. Still, I tried. I included her in the menu tasting. I let her choose the tea service. I agreed to display 3 framed photographs of Elliot as a baby. I declined only the things that changed the shower into something that no longer belonged to me. No games involving melted chocolate in diapers. No public birth predictions. No advice cards from strangers. No opening gifts in front of everyone for 2 hours. I wanted lunch, cake, conversation. A quiet afternoon before my daughter arrived. Marjorie called it sterile. I called it manageable. 3 weeks before the shower, we had our worst conversation. She came to the house carrying a garment bag. Inside was a pale blue dress with a stiff collar and a satin bow tied above the waist. It was not maternity clothing. It was 2 sizes too small. She said she had worn it while pregnant with Elliot. I held the dress against me. The hem stopped halfway down my thighs. I told her it was beautiful but would not fit. She said a seamstress could let it out. I said I had already bought something. Her expression changed. Only slightly, she asked to see it. I showed her the cream linen dress hanging on the closet door. It had short sleeves, a square neckline, and enough room for me to sit comfortably. Marjorie touched the fabric between 2 fingers. Then she said it looked casual. I told her that was why I liked it. She said photographs lasted longer than discomfort. I handed the blue dress back. She did not take it. She laid it across the bed instead, and said I had a habit of rejecting family traditions before understanding them. I told her a dress was not a tradition. She replied that it was not only the dress. I asked what else it was. She looked at the nursery, at the flat-packed crib we had chosen, at the stack of cloth diapers, at the second-hand rocking chair my mother had refinished. Then she said, "You keep acting as though this baby belongs only to you." The words landed without drama. No raised voice, no pointing finger. Just a sentence, placed carefully between us. I said, "She belongs to herself. Elliot and I are responsible for her." Marjorie's mouth tightened. She picked up the garment bag. At the bedroom door, she said families did not survive when women treated every boundary like a locked gate. I told Elliot that night. He rubbed both hands over his face. Then he said his mother should not have said it. I waited. He added that she was frightened of being shut out. I asked whether he thought I was shutting her out. He said no. Then he said I could sometimes be rigid. I slept in the guest room. The next morning he apologized. He said he had handled it badly. He said he would speak to her. I asked what he planned to say. He told me he would make it clear that the shower was ours, not hers. I wanted to believe that conversation happened. At 9:46 on the Thursday before the shower, I walked upstairs and opened Elliot's office door. He was wearing headphones, a spreadsheet filled one monitor, a video meeting filled the other. He saw my face and muted himself. I said, "Your mother canceled the florist." His eyes moved toward the door behind me, as though the answer might be standing there. He asked what I meant. I told him exactly. Wednesday, 4:42. White Fern Floral Studio. Cancellation request. Family decision. He pulled off his headphones. Then he said, "She would not do that without a reason." I felt something inside me become very still. Not break. Settle. I asked whether he knew about it. He said no. I asked whether she had called him yesterday. He looked at his phone. He said she called around 4, but he had been in a meeting. I asked if she left a message. He opened his voicemail. There was one from Marjorie at 4:51. He played it aloud. Her voice was calm. She said she had taken care of Saturday and would explain later. She said it was better this way. She said he should focus on Clara and the baby. Elliot stopped the recording. The office smelled faintly of coffee and warm electronics. I asked him to call her. He said he would. I stayed in the doorway. He looked at me. Then he called. Marjorie answered on the second ring. Elliot put her on speaker. He asked what she had taken care of. Marjorie paused. Then she said she had canceled the shower. Not only the florist. The entire shower. My fingers closed around the doorframe. Elliot asked why. She said the event had become a source of tension. She said I was not well. She said my blood pressure was elevated. She said a responsible person had to make the decision no one else was willing to make. I stepped into the room. I said, "You did not have permission." Silence. Then Marjorie said she had wondered whether I was listening. I repeated that she did not have permission. She said Bellwether House had accepted the cancellation because her card paid the deposit. I asked whether the venue was canceled. She said yes. The caterer? Yes. The cake? Yes. The tea service? Yes. I asked whether she had contacted the guests. Another pause. She said not yet. I looked at Elliot. His face had gone pale. I asked Marjorie what she planned to tell them. She said the truth, that my doctor had advised against the event. I said my doctor had done no such thing. Marjorie replied that my doctor had advised me to avoid stress. I said, "You are the stress." Elliot closed his eyes. Marjorie inhaled slowly. Then she said that comment confirmed she had made the correct decision. I did not shout. I asked why she had waited until 2 days before the shower. She said because I had left her no other option. I asked what option I had taken away. She said I had reduced the guest list, changed the cake, refused the family dress, removed the gift opening tradition, told her she could not stay with us after the birth, limited hospital visitors, rejected the crib. Each item came out measured and organized, a file she had been building. I listened until she finished. Then I said, "Those were decisions about my body, my home, and my child." She replied that Elliot was her child. I said, "Elliot is 34. She said age did not dissolve family. I looked at him. He stared at the muted meeting on his monitor. I asked Marjorie whether she had any intention of reinstating the event. She said no. I said, "Understood." Then I ended the call. Elliot looked at me as though I had dropped the phone from a roof. He said, "Clara." I told him I needed the room. He asked what I was going to do. I said, "Find out what she canceled." He stood. I told him to stay. My voice was flat enough that he did. I went downstairs and opened the event spreadsheet. The structure calmed me. Vendor, contact, contract holder, deposit, balance, cancellation terms, status. There were 9 active items: venue, caterer, cake, florist, tea service, chair rental, photographer, printed place cards, guest favors. At 10:02, I started calling. Bellwether House answered first. The manager's name was Rowan Pike. He confirmed that Marjorie had requested cancellation the previous afternoon. I asked whether the date had been released. He said no. The venue required 72 hours before canceled weekend bookings returned to the public calendar. Since the event was less than 72 hours away, the booking could not be resold through their system. I asked what that meant in practical terms. He said the venue was empty on Saturday, from 10 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. I asked whether the cancellation could be reversed. He said the original contract holder would need to authorize it. I opened the contract. Both Marjorie's name and mine appeared under client. I told him that. He checked. Then he said I was correct. The reservation had 2 authorized clients. One had canceled, the other could reinstate. I asked how much remained due. $1,800. The deposit had been $900. Marjorie had paid it. The remaining balance was unpaid because she had canceled before the final card charge. I asked whether I could pay it myself. He said yes. I gave him my card number. When he asked whether I wanted the original room arrangement restored, I looked through the glass doors toward our small, wet garden. I said, "Exactly as contracted." He sent a payment confirmation at 10:16. Bellwether House was mine again. The venue she tried to keep from me was no longer hers to withdraw. I called the caterer. Marjorie had canceled, but the food had already been ordered. The company had planned to donate the prepared ingredients if no replacement booking appeared. I reinstated lunch. I called the bakery. The lemon cake had not been canceled. Marjorie had asked to change the pickup name to hers. I changed it back. The tea service was more complicated. Their staff had been reassigned to a wedding. I removed the service and arranged coffee, tea, and chilled water through the caterer. The chair rental had never been canceled. The photographer had received a message saying the event was postponed. She still had the date open. The place cards were already printed. The favors were in my hall closet. By 11:21, 7 of the 9 items were restored. I updated each row in the spreadsheet. Green for confirmed, yellow for changed, red for unresolved. Only 1 row remained red. Guests. Marjorie had not contacted them yet. That gave me a narrow advantage. I opened the invitation list. 37 names, 34 phone numbers, 3 email addresses. I started with my mother. She answered from the garden center, where she worked 3 days a week. I could hear shopping carts and a beeping forklift behind her. She asked whether something was wrong with the baby. I said the baby was fine. Then I told her what Marjorie had done. My mother did not interrupt. When I finished, she asked one question. She said, "Is the shower still happening?" I looked at the 7 green rows. I said yes. She replied, "Then tell me what to carry." That was my mother. No speech, no insult, a practical question. I asked her to pick up 2 large dispensers for iced water and lemonade. She said she would. My sister Nina reacted differently. She said Marjorie had lost her mind. I told her I did not need commentary. I needed help contacting guests. Nina was silent for half a second. Then she said, "Send me half the list." We split the names. I wrote a simple message. There had been an unauthorized cancellation attempt. The shower remained scheduled for Saturday, May 18th, at Bellwether House from noon until 4. Guests should disregard any conflicting information. I read the message twice. It did not accuse. It did not explain. It stated the facts. At 11:38, I sent it to the first guest. At 11:39, my phone rang. It was Elliot. He was still upstairs. I declined the call. He came down 2 minutes later. He stood at the end of the dining table while I checked replies. My friend Simone had confirmed. My coworker Janet had confirmed. Elliot's aunt Celia had replied with 3 question marks and then called Nina. Elliot asked what I was doing. I said, holding the shower. He looked at the spreadsheet, then at me. He said his mother had canceled the venue. I told him I reinstated it. He asked how. I said my name was on the contract. He pulled out a chair but did not sit. He said we should slow down. I asked why. He said because there was clearly a serious conflict, and holding the event anyway might make it worse. I looked at him. The baby pressed hard beneath my right ribs. I shifted in the chair. Then I asked what he thought should happen. He said maybe we should postpone until after the birth. I asked whose idea that was. He said his. I asked when it became his idea. He did not answer. I turned the laptop toward him. I showed him the payment confirmation from Bellwether House. $1,800. My card, my name. I said, "Your mother did not cancel the shower because of my health. She canceled it because I would not let her control it." He said he knew she had crossed a line. I asked which line. He rubbed his palm across the table. He said all of it. I waited. Then, he added that she believed she was protecting the family. I closed the laptop. I said, "She is protecting her position in it." He lowered his voice. He said, "She is still my mother." I replied, "And I am still your wife." The sentence sat between us. Neither of us moved. Then he said something I had not expected. He said, "I do not know how to keep both of you happy." I looked at the rain running down the patio door. I said, "That is because you think the goal is to keep both of us happy." He asked what the goal should be. I said, "To recognize when one of us is wrong." He sat down then. His shoulders dropped. For the first time that morning, he looked less like Marjorie's son and more like the man I had married. But looking like him was not enough. He needed to act like him. He asked what I wanted him to do. I told him I was not going to write his part for him. I reopened the laptop. He stayed at the table for another minute. Then he went upstairs. At 12:07, Marjorie called. I let it ring. She called again at 12:09. Then she sent a message. She said Elliot told her I had reinstated the venue. I did not reply. A second message arrived. She said the deposit was her money. I replied that the remaining balance was mine. She wrote that she did not consent to her payment being used for an event she no longer supported. I looked at the contract terms. The deposit was non-refundable. It would remain applied whether the room stayed empty or I used it. I typed that. She replied 3 minutes later. She said that was not the point. I wrote, "I know." Then I muted her conversation. By 1 in the afternoon, 29 guests had confirmed. 4 declined due to previous commitments. 2 had not responded. 1 number was disconnected. 1 guest, Marjorie's cousin Adele, called me directly. She was 68 and spoke slowly because of a surgery that had affected one side of her mouth. She said Marjorie had called her at noon. I asked what Marjorie told her. Adele said Marjorie claimed I was ignoring medical advice and forcing the event to proceed. I felt a brief pulse in my neck. then it passed. I asked Adele whether she wanted to attend. She said yes. She said she had already embroidered the baby's name on a blanket. I told her we had not announced the name. Adele paused. Then she said, Marjorie told her. That was the first moment all day when my composure nearly left me. Our daughter's name was Sylvie. Only 5 people knew. My mother, my sister, Elliot, Marjorie, my best friend Simone. We had told Marjorie on the condition that she keep it private. I asked Adele when she learned the name, 6 weeks earlier, at a family lunch I had not attended because of nausea. I thanked her for telling me. Then I went upstairs. Elliot was no longer in a meeting. He was sitting at his desk with both elbows on his knees. I asked whether he knew his mother had shared the baby's name. He looked up sharply. He said no. I told him Adele had embroidered it on a blanket 6 weeks ago. He stood. I said, sit down. He did. I asked whether he had shared the name with anyone else. He said no. I believed him. His face had changed. The denial was immediate. Clean. I said, she took something we gave her privately and distributed it like family property. He stared at the floor. Then he said, I will handle it. I asked what that meant. He said he would tell her not to come Saturday. I had not considered banning Marjorie. Not yet. I had imagined she would refuse to attend on principle or appear and behave as though nothing had happened. Both possibilities felt unpleasant but manageable. I asked whether that was what he wanted. He said it was what she had earned. I did not like the word earned. It made the shower sound like a punishment. I said, this is not about punishing her. He looked at me. I continued. I said, if you tell her not to come, do it because you believe her presence will make the day unsafe or disruptive. Do not do it to prove something to me. He nodded. Then he asked if I wanted her there. I thought about the canceled flowers, the changed recovery email, the lie about my doctor, the private name passed around a lunch table. I said no. He picked up his phone. I left before he called. At 2:26, he came downstairs. He told me it was done. I asked how she responded. He said she told him I had forced him to choose. I asked what he said. He looked directly at me. He said, I told her she made me choose when she canceled my wife's baby shower behind our backs. I waited for relief. It did not come. Trust did not return because someone said one correct sentence, but the sentence mattered. I nodded. Then I asked whether she agreed to stay away. He said she did not agree. He said she also did not say she would come. That was not enough. I called Rowan at Bellwether House. I explained that an unauthorized person might attempt to enter or alter the booking. I gave him Marjorie's full name and asked that no changes be accepted from her. He added a password to the event account. I chose Lemonwood. It was the name of the wood finish I had been testing at work when I learned I was pregnant. I told Rowan that only I could authorize changes. He said understood. Then I hired a door attendant through the venue for 4 hours. It cost $160. I paid it. There were expenses I would have avoided under normal circumstances. This was not normal. Thursday evening, the rain stopped. My mother and Nina came over with groceries, drink dispensers, and a roll of twine. We moved the favors from the hall closet to labeled boxes. Each favor was a small packet of wildflower seeds wrapped in cream paper. Marjorie had disliked them. She wanted engraved silver spoons. I had asked what a newborn's guests were supposed to do with 37 miniature spoons. She said keep them. I preferred flowers. At 6, we ate soup at the dining table. Elliot joined us. No one mentioned Marjorie for 12 minutes. Then Nina asked whether he had changed the lock code on the venue account. He said Clara had. Nina said good. My mother gave her a look. The conversation moved on. After they left, Elliot carried the favor boxes to the car. I stood in the doorway and watched him. The street smelled wet and clean. A neighbor's child rode a red scooter through a shallow puddle. Elliot closed the trunk and came back toward me. He said he was sorry. I asked which part. He stopped on the path. Then he said, every time she crossed a line, I treated your reaction as the bigger problem because it was easier to ask you to be flexible than to ask her to stop. I leaned against the doorframe. The porch light made a pale circle over his head. I said, "Yes." He looked down. He said, "I thought I was keeping peace." I replied, "You were moving the conflict into our house." He nodded. There was no argument, no explanation. He asked if he could still attend the shower. The question hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted him excluded, because he was uncertain whether he belonged there. I said, "Yes, you are the baby's father." He asked whether I wanted him there. I said, "I want you there if you can be present without spending the day managing your mother's feelings." He said he could. I told him I would believe that when I saw it. He accepted that. Friday morning, I woke at 5:12 with a cramp in my left calf. The bedroom was dark. Elliot was asleep beside me. For a few seconds, I did not remember the shower. Then my phone lit up on the nightstand. 12 unread messages. Marjorie had started contacting guests. She told them the event was disputed. She said she could not guarantee access to the venue. She advised them not to bring gifts. She told one guest the caterer had withdrawn. She told another the building would be locked. I knew because 3 women had forwarded her messages to me. The wording was nearly identical each time. I sat upright and opened my laptop. By 5:29, I had written a final confirmation. Bellwether House had verified the booking. The venue would be open, lunch would be served, the shower would proceed as scheduled. I attached the venue's official confirmation email. Then I sent it to the entire guest list. At 6:03, Rowan emailed me. He said Marjorie had called the venue's emergency line at 5:47. She claimed I had fraudulently used her deposit. The venue manager had referred her to the contract. She then requested that her name be removed. Rowan sent a simple amendment. I signed it. Marjorie's name disappeared from the booking. Mine remained. The venue she had selected, paid toward, canceled, and tried to keep empty, now belonged contractually to me alone for the day. At 7:10, I made tea. Elliot came into the kitchen wearing yesterday's t-shirt. I showed him the forwarded messages. He read each one. His jaw tightened. Then he said he would call her. I told him not before breakfast. He looked confused. I said, "She has taken enough of our mornings." We ate toast. Mine had peanut butter. His had nothing. At 7:32, he went outside to call. He stayed in the garden for 28 minutes. I could see him pacing behind the wet lilac bush. When he returned, he looked older. He said Marjorie would not attend. I asked if she agreed. He said she accused him of abandoning her. Then she said she was finished trying to protect him from me. I waited. He said he ended the call. That was all. No victory, no celebration. A son had ended a painful conversation with his mother. I did not need to make it more dramatic than it was. Friday passed in lists. Pick up cake, confirm photographer, steam dress, charge camera batteries, pack medication, prepare emergency contact card, place gifts from distant relatives in the car. At 3 in the afternoon, I checked my blood pressure. It was higher than usual, but below the threshold my doctor had given me. I called the nurse anyway. I explained the situation without using Marjorie's name. The nurse asked about headache, vision changes, swelling, and pain. I had none. She told me to rest, hydrate, and call again if the reading increased. She did not tell me to cancel the shower. I wrote down the time, 3:18 p.m. I wrote down the reading. I wrote down the nurse's instructions. I did not plan to show Marjorie. The record was for me. That evening, I packed a small bag in case I needed to leave the shower early. Comfortable shoes, blood pressure cuff, water bottle, crackers, phone charger, medical file. I placed it beside the front door. At 9, Elliot found me in the nursery. I was sitting in the refinished rocking chair with one hand on my stomach. The room was nearly finished. The smaller crib stood against the wall. The yellow sleeper lay folded on the changing table. A wooden mobile hung above the crib, 4 carved birds turning slowly in the air from the ceiling vent. Elliot sat on the floor. He said his mother had left a box on the porch. I asked what was in it. The blue dress, the walnut crib receipt, a sealed envelope containing copies of the shower invoices, and the leather planner she had given me when we became engaged. I looked toward the hallway. I asked where the box was now. He said in the garage. I told him to leave it there. He asked whether I wanted him to return it. I said not tonight. He rested his head against the wall. Then he said, "She told me she canceled the shower because she believed you were replacing her." I looked at him. He continued, "She believed my mother was being included more. She believed she would have less access to the baby. She believed every decision I made without her was evidence that I did not respect her." I asked whether he agreed. He said no. I asked whether he understood why she believed it. He said yes. Then he said understanding it did not make it acceptable. That was another correct sentence. I let it stand. Saturday morning arrived clear. At 7:04, sunlight passed through the bedroom curtains and formed a bright rectangle across the floor. I lay still for a moment. The baby moved. 3 small kicks, then quiet. I placed my hand where she had moved. I said her name under my breath, Sylvie. The name was no longer completely private, but it was still hers. At 8, my mother arrived with breakfast. At 8:30, Nina came carrying garment bags and a toolbox. She said the toolbox was for emotional support. I told her that made no sense. She said it did to her. By 9, my cream dress was steamed. My hair was pinned loosely at the back. I wore flat tan shoes. No blue satin. No stiff collar. At 9:41, Elliot loaded the car. He wore a dark green shirt I had bought him at Christmas. Before we left, he stood in the kitchen holding the keys. He asked whether I was ready. I looked around the room. The cold toast from Thursday was gone. The jam streak had been wiped away. The calendar still showed the shower in gold ink. I said yes. Bellwether House appeared beyond a row of young maple trees at 10:27. The building was exactly as I remembered it. Red brick. White stone steps. Tall windows reflecting the pond. A brass sign near the entrance. For 2 days, Marjorie had tried to turn that building into an empty monument to her authority. Instead, the front doors opened when I approached. Rowan stood inside. He was a narrow man with silver glasses and a navy vest. He greeted me by name, then he handed me the updated contract. Only one client was listed, Clara Vale. I signed the arrival form at 10:31. The garden room smelled of polished wood and early sunlight. 37 cream chairs surrounded 6 round tables. Sage runners lay across each table. The framed photographs of Elliot as a baby stood on a sideboard, because I had never objected to them. The caterers carried in trays of roasted vegetables, small sandwiches, fruit, and lemon tarts. The florist arrived at 10:46. She brought white ranunculus, eucalyptus, and pale green hydrangeas. Lena introduced herself. I thanked her for calling me. She said something had felt wrong about the cancellation. I told her she had been right. We placed the flowers in low glass bowls so guests could see across the tables. At 11, the photographer arrived. At 11:10, my mother filled the drink dispensers. At 11:20, Nina tied wildflower favors with twine. At 11:30, the door attendant took his place in the foyer. His name was Dorian. He wore a gray suit and carried a guest list on a clipboard. I gave him Marjorie's photograph. I said she was not authorized to enter. He nodded once. No questions. At 11:43, the first guest arrived. It was Adele. She carried a square white box. She hugged me carefully. Then she opened the box and showed me the blanket. Cream wool, small green leaves stitched around the edge. The name Sylvie embroidered in the corner. I touched the letters. Adele said she was sorry if she had spoiled something. I told her she had not. The secret had been taken from us before she ever heard it. Her hands had only turned it into something warm. She looked relieved. At 11:50, Simone arrived. At 11:53, Janet. At noon, the room began to fill. Women placed gifts along the west wall. Coats hung in the foyer. The sound of conversation rose toward the glass ceiling. No one mentioned a locked building. No one found the caterer missing. No one was turned away. At 12:11, Elliot's Aunt Celia approached me. She wore a violet jacket and carried no gift. She said she nearly had not come. I asked why. She said Marjorie told her I was using the shower to divide the family. I looked across the room at my mother pouring lemonade for Adele. I said, "Do you feel divided?" Celia considered the question. Then she said no. I replied, "Neither do I." She stayed for lunch. At 12:26, I saw Dorian step away from the front doors. He spoke quietly to Rowan. Rowan looked toward me. Then he walked across the room. My body knew before he spoke. Marjorie was outside. She had arrived alone. She was wearing a pale blue dress, not the same one she had offered me. A newer version, same color, same high collar. She had a white gift bag in one hand. I looked toward Elliot. He was standing near the cake table. He saw Rowan beside me and came over. Rowan said Marjorie claimed there had been a misunderstanding. She wanted to speak with us. Elliot looked at me. I asked whether she was causing a scene. Rowan said no. She was standing near the entrance. Several guests had seen her through the windows. I felt the room tilt for 1 second. Not physically, emotionally. The old pattern opened in front of me. Marjorie would enter. She would speak softly. She would say her intentions had been misunderstood. Elliot would ask me to allow one afternoon of peace. I would agree because 30 people were watching. She would sit near the front. She would receive sympathy. By the end of the day, the story would become a disagreement between two women. Not an unauthorized cancellation, not a lie, not a private boundary broken repeatedly, a disagreement. I looked at Rowan. I said, "She is not on the guest list." He nodded. Then I looked at Elliot. I expected hesitation. There was none. He said, "I will speak to her outside." I said, "No." His face changed. I continued. I said, "Dorian can tell her the event is private, and she is not admitted. There is nothing left to discuss at the entrance." Elliot looked through the glass doors. Marjorie stood at the bottom of the steps. The white gift bag hung from her wrist. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then he said, "All right." Rowan returned to the foyer. Dorian stepped outside. From the garden room, I could not hear the conversation. I saw Marjorie speak. Dorian listened. She lifted the gift bag. He shook his head. She looked toward the windows. For 1 second, our eyes met through 2 panes of glass and 20 feet of polished floor. Her expression was not furious. It was wounded. That made it harder. People are easier to refuse when they look cruel. Marjorie looked like a woman standing outside a family event she had once imagined hosting. That was true. It was also incomplete. She was standing outside because she had canceled the event without permission, lied about my health, contacted the guests, and tried to keep the venue empty. Both truths existed. I did not need to erase one to honor the other. Dorian spoke again. Marjorie set the gift bag on the top step. Then she walked back to her car. She did not shout. She did not pound on the door. No one applauded. Her own choices had brought her to that step. I had not staged it. I had only kept the boundary she had tried to remove. Elliot watched until her car left the drive. Then he picked up the gift bag. I asked what he was doing. He said he would put it in our car. I said, "Check it first." Inside was a silver picture frame. No note, no apology, no name, just an empty frame wrapped in white tissue. Elliot closed the bag. He carried it outside. At 12:42, lunch was served. The interruption lasted 16 minutes. After that, the shower became what I had wanted from the beginning: simple, warm, manageable. We ate at round tables. Adele told a story about Elliot trying to sleep inside a laundry basket when he was 3. My mother laughed so hard she wiped tears from her cheeks. Nina passed around cards asking guests to write one hope for the baby. Not advice, not predictions, just hope. Simone wrote that she hoped Sylvie would always know the difference between being loved and being managed. She showed it to me before folding it. I told her it was a little pointed. She said it was also true. I let her place it in the wooden box. At 1:30, the cake was carried in. 1 tier, lemon, white frosting, small green leaves around the base, no sugar tower, no blue ribbon. Elliot cut the first slice. He handed it to me on a cream plate. I took 1 bite. The cake was dense and sharp with lemon, exactly what I had ordered. At 2, I opened only 4 gifts: a quilt from my mother, the embroidered blanket from Adele, a set of wooden blocks from my coworkers, a small music box from Nina. The rest stayed wrapped. No one complained. The photographer took a picture of me beside the west windows. The pond behind me was silver in the afternoon light. My cream dress fell softly over my stomach. My shoes were visible beneath the hem. I looked comfortable. I was comfortable. At 2:18, Elliot joined me for a photograph. He placed one hand lightly behind my back. The photographer asked us to look at each other. I did. His eyes were tired, so were mine. But he was there, not between 2 women, beside his wife. At 3, several guests began to leave. They took wildflower seeds from the basket near the door. They hugged me. They thanked us for lunch. No one asked why Marjorie had been outside. Perhaps they already knew. Perhaps they understood enough not to ask. Celia stayed until nearly the end. Before leaving, she touched my arm. She said Marjorie had always believed responsibility gave her authority. I said those were not the same thing. Celia nodded. Then she left. At 3:37, only my mother, Nina, Simone, Elliot, and the venue staff remained. The room looked used in the best way. Half-empty glasses, crumbs on plates, folded napkins, a flower head resting on the floor beside a chair. Rowan brought me the final invoice. Everything was paid. Nothing remained under Marjorie's account. I signed the closing form. Then I asked whether I could keep 1 copy of the updated contract. He placed it in a cream envelope. On the front, he wrote my name. At 4:02, I walked outside. The gift bag was gone from the steps. Elliot had put it in our trunk. The maple leaves moved in a light wind. Behind me, staff began clearing the garden room. Through the glass, I could see the sage table runners, the white flowers, and the last untouched slice of lemon cake. The venue had not remained empty. That was the part Marjorie had failed to understand. She thought paying the deposit made the day hers to grant or remove. She thought canceling the room would cancel my choices with it. She thought if she withdrew her approval, everyone else would disappear. They did not. My mother carried the leftover cake. Nina carried the wooden box of hopes. Simone carried 2 flower arrangements. Elliot carried the gifts. I carried the cream envelope containing the contract. At home, we unloaded everything into the dining room, the house filled with boxes and tissue paper. My feet ached. The baby pressed low against my pelvis. I changed into soft gray pants and checked my blood pressure. It was normal. At 6:14, Elliot stood beside the kitchen counter, holding the white gift bag. He asked what I wanted to do with it. I looked at the empty silver frame. I said put it in the garage with the blue dress. He did. Then he returned and leaned against the refrigerator. He told me Marjorie had sent him one message. I asked what it said. He said she hoped he was satisfied. I asked whether he replied. He said yes. I waited. He said he told her satisfaction had nothing to do with it. She had been asked to respect a boundary and refused. I nodded. Then I placed the leftover lemon cake in the refrigerator. Sunday passed quietly. Marjorie did not call me. She called Elliot 4 times. He answered once. The conversation lasted 6 minutes. He did not tell me every word. I did not ask. He said he told her we would contact her when we were ready. That was enough for the moment. On Monday, White Fern Floral Studio delivered 2 arrangements that had been left behind at the venue. One went in the nursery, one went on the dining table. The eucalyptus smelled clean and sharp. At 11, Rowan emailed the event photographs provided by the venue's security system. Not the professional photographs. Simple time-stamped images from the foyer. At 10:27, I entered Bellwether House. At 11:43, Adele arrived. At 12:26, Marjorie stood outside. At 12:34, she left. At 4:02, I walked out carrying the envelope. I saved only one image, the last one. In it, I stood at the top of the white stone steps. My cream dress moved slightly in the wind. The envelope rested against my stomach. The brass Bellwether House sign was visible behind me. No one looking at the photograph would know what had happened. They would only see a pregnant woman leaving her baby shower. That was enough. 2 weeks later, Sylvie was born. 7 pounds, 1 ounce. A narrow patch of dark hair. Long fingers. She arrived at 6:48 on a Tuesday morning, after 12 hours of labor. My mother visited that afternoon. Nina came the next day. Marjorie did not come to the hospital. Elliot sent her one photograph after asking me first. She replied that Sylvie was beautiful. Nothing else. When we returned home, the silver frame was still in the garage. The blue dress remained folded inside the garment bag. The leather planner lay beneath both of them. I did not throw anything away. I also did not bring it inside. For the first month, Elliot and I slept in fragments. We fed Sylvie at midnight, 2:30, and 5. We tracked diapers on a whiteboard. We washed bottles in warm water under the kitchen light. We argued once about laundry, and twice about whether the room was too cold. Ordinary arguments. Our arguments. Not echoes from another house. Marjorie began seeing a family counselor on her own. Elliot did not ask her to. Celia later told us. I did not treat it as proof of change. Change took time. In July, Marjorie wrote me a letter, 3 pages. No accusations, no explanation of how frightened she had been. She wrote that canceling the shower had been wrong. She wrote that she had used concern for my health to justify taking control. She wrote that she had confused helping with deciding. I read the letter twice. Then I placed it in the cream envelope with the Bellwether House contract. I did not respond immediately. 3 weeks later, Elliot and I met her in a public garden cafe. Sylvie slept in a carrier against my chest. Marjorie looked smaller than I remembered. She did not ask to hold the baby. She waited. That mattered. She said she was sorry. I said I heard her. She asked whether we could begin again. I told her we could begin differently. Not again. Again would return us to the same roles. Different meant she asked before arranging. Different meant no private information was shared. Different meant no unannounced purchases. Different meant my no remained no even when she disliked it. She listened. Then she said, I understand. I did not know whether she did, but she listened. That was the first required step. Wildflower seeds from the shower remained in a basket near our front door until autumn. We had taken home the extra packets. In October, I opened them. Elliot and I scattered the seeds along the narrow strip beside the back fence. The soil was cold. Sylvie watched from a carrier against his chest. Nothing happened for months. Winter flattened the garden. Rain darkened the fence. The seed paper dissolved beneath the soil. Then, in late April, small green shoots appeared. By May, there were flowers. White, yellow, violet, uneven and crowded. On the morning of May 18th, 1 year after the shower, I carried Sylvie outside. She was barefoot. Her feet moved against my hip. The flowers reached almost to my knees. I picked one small white bloom and placed it in her hand. She crushed it immediately. The petals stuck to her palm. Behind us, the kitchen window stood open. On the dining table inside was the photograph from Bellwether House. I had finally printed it. The picture showed me leaving the venue Marjorie had tried to keep. The cream envelope rested against my stomach. The doors stood open behind me. The room had been used. The cake had been cut. The chairs had been filled. And in the garden, 1 year later, the seeds we gave away that afternoon had returned as flowers along my own fence.